Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to our 44th Saturday Online Kashmir Cultural Heritage Awareness Series. We have with us today Padma Shri Professor Dr. Bettina Sharada Bäumer on From Regional Identity to Universal Consciousness with the example of Abhinavagupta. Let's begin our program with a prayer song specially made for today by Dr. Shaivism.
द्वारेशा नवरन्ध्रग्रा हृदयगो वास्तुर्गणेशो मनः शब्दाद्या गुरवः समीरदशकं त्वाधारशक्त्यात्मकम् चिद्देवोत विमर्श शक्ति सहितः षाड्गुण्यमङ्गावली लोकेशा करणानि यस्य महिमातं नेत्रनाथं स्तुमः लोकेशाः करणानि यस्य महिमातं नेत्रनाथं स्तुमः लोकेशा करणानि यस्य महिमा तं नेत्रनाथं स्तुमः.
We thank Dr. Harini for all the efforts for this special prayer song, and we look forward to seeing her more in the near future. Thank you, Harini.
Pleasure is mine.
We thank Sri Kanchi Mutt for our ongoing series and offer our namaskars to His Holiness Sri Shankara Vijayendra Saraswati Swami. As always, Kanchi Mutt has been in the forefront, modestly working with the sole aim of national integration, spiritual enlightenment, and preserving the uniqueness of Kashmir, as Kashmir is our cultural heritage. We are very pleased to welcome and introduce Dr. Bettina Sharada Bäumer. Professor Sharada Bäumer is a scholar of Indology and religious studies, specialized in the tradition of non-dualist Kashmir Shaivism. Her other fields of research and publication have been Shilpa Shastra and temple architecture of Odisha and Indian aesthetics. Living and working in Varanasi since 1967, she has been coordinator of Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts in Varanasi, visiting professor at the universities of Vienna, Salzburg, Bern, fellow at the Center for the Study of World Religions, Harvard University, national fellow at Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla from 2015 to 2017. Since 2006, director Abhinavagupta Research Library, author and editor of 22 books and more than 80 research activities. Our latest relevant publications are Abhinavagupta's Hermeneutics of the Absolute, Anuttaravikriya 2011, and the Yoga of Netra Tantra, Third Eye and Overcoming Death, both published by IAAS. She is a direct disciple of the last great master of Kashmir Shaivism, Swami Lakshmanji, 1907-1991. She has been teaching texts of Kashmir Shaivism in retreat seminars in different institutions in India and Europe for the last 20 years. And some of her teachings are available on YouTube. Awarded an honorary doctorate from the University of Salzburg in 2002, recipient of Padma Shri from the President of India in 2015. We are grateful to Professor Bettina Sharada Bäumer for joining us today. She first told me that she is no longer making presentations. After hearing about her series, She wondered why she did not participate earlier. She recalls blessings by His Holiness Paramacharya and a meeting along with archaeologist Sri Naraswamy. Professor Bäumer is proficient in German, my mother tongue, English, French, Italian, and of course Hindi. Ancient languages Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. Over to you, Madame Bäumer.
Namaskar. If we consider a contested space from a positive point of view, it means that the two or more people or groups who contest it are attached to it and consider it their own. Negatively, to the exclusion of other contestants. This attachment may be emotional, cultural, or social. This leads to tension, competition, violence, up to the point of war. This exclusivism and limited view of possession can only be overcome by an expansion of consciousness from the individualistic and group-centered view to an inclusive and universal attitude and acceptance. Now, Kashmir, which finds itself in such a contested situation, is a unique place on the earth, which has precisely developed a universal philosophy based on and proven by a spirituality, which leads to an expansion of consciousness from the individual to the universal. And such an all-embracing view and practice is already contained in some of the earliest scriptures of Kashmir Shaivism, such as the Vijnana Bhairava and the Netra Tantra, whose Mangala Shloka we have just heard. It has been brought to a high level of philosophical and spiritual development in the subsequent authors of non-dualist Shaivism, Somananda, Utpaladeva, Abhinavagupta, Kshemaraja, to mention the most outstanding acharyas. In this presentation, I want to show how a great philosopher and mystic like Abhinavagupta has bridged the apparent gap between a deep love and attachment to his country, Kashmir, and his philosophy and experience of universal consciousness. No doubt, Abhinavagupta is one of the greatest contributions of Kashmir, not only to Shaivism, not only to India, but to the whole world. Abhinavagupta was a philosopher, mystic, aesthetician, and poetician in the 10th, 11th century. At the end of his magnum opus, Tantraloka, Abhinavagupta pays an enchanting homage to Kashmir, not only as a land of knowledge and sanctity, as Sharada, seat of the goddess of learning, but even describing its natural and sensual charm. Although his ancestors came to Kashmir from Antavedi, the middle land between the rivers Ganga and Yamuna, he feels a deep attachment to the land where his forefathers settled and where he attained whatever a human being can attain. But his philosophy of Trika and Prativijna being based on the universality of consciousness, Samvit Chit, the question may be asked, how does he reconcile his attachment to a particular place in the universe and in the subcontinent called Kanya or Kumarika in the ancient cosmography, with the all-pervading presence of divine consciousness, independent of space, time, causation, and form. This question implies the role of sacred geography in non-dualistic Kashmir Shaivism, which is dealt with exhaustively in the chapter on the way of space, Desha Atvan, in the same Tantraloka. Abhinavagupta starts his concluding verses of the Tantraloka with a cosmic vision of the whole universe consisting of 36 levels of reality, tattvas, and an endless number of worlds, bhuvana. In fact, there are 118 worlds according to the Shaiva Agamas. In a sense, anticipating the modern scientific view of an expanding universe. I quote, by the force of the 36 tattvas, or levels of reality, an endless series of universes has been created. But among them, the exceedingly beautiful one is Brahmanda, for there is no sense of beauty without manifoldness. End of the quote. He comes down to describing the 7 worlds and then the various continents and islands, Dvipa, of which the subcontinent called Kumarika is the foremost. The reason given is interesting. It is here, quote, where the sages have the capacity to ascend from the lower stages to a highest goal, which is Shiva. He then proceeds to defining the best country in the foremost continent. Quote, the best and most praiseworthy country in the continent Kanya is where the most excellent scriptures are found, Shastras. And here comes the well-known statement that the middle land, Madhya Desha, which is central India, but also from where his ancestors came, is the seat of all the scriptures, Shastra. It is here where Abhinavagupta's ancestor, Atrigupta, was born, who had devoured the ocean of Shastras. He is described like that. And here, the king Lalitaditya, who got to know about his qualities and vast knowledge, brought him to Kashmir at the high place of the Himalaya, Kashmirakyam Himalaya Modagam, presided over by Shiva and protected by his attendants Vijaya and others. Now, quote, the most outstanding feature of this blessed country is that, quote, here at many places sages have made their dwelling, Muni, and at every step Shiva himself is presiding. I believe, says Abhinavagupta, that for attaining any desired accomplishment or spiritual power, siddhi, there is no other place but Kashmir to reach a state of fullness. End of the quote. There the goddess of wisdom, Sharada herself, is present, but it is also a place of love, passion, and beauty, incited by wine, Madhya. The wine not only incites the passion of love, but it is also instrumental in awakening the circle of divinities in the body, Devata Chakra, and is bestowing both enjoyment and liberation, Bhoga Moksha, Bhoga Apavaga. This is significant because it shows the connection between the sensual and the spiritual in the tantric traditions, enhanced by the natural beauty of Kashmir and its people. Abhinavagupta does not fail to describe the richness of the country in saffron. More than that, Kashmir is the land, quote, where every person is a poet, wise, brave, and loquacious, where the women are graceful and radiant like the moonlight, and where the group of yoginis reside, who are pure like ether, having unfolded the infinite path of Sushumna by absorbing the sun and the moon. Now, this is an indication of the tantric spirituality of Kundalini, and yoginis reside in this blessed country who have become yoginis because they have realized that unity of prana and apana, of the breathing out and breathing in the center, which is Sushumna. The importance given to the yoginis throws light on a continuous, too often hidden tradition, of which Laleshwari, at a later time, is a glorious example. The status of being a yogini is attained precisely by the awakening of the Kundalini within. Abhinavagupta goes on to describe the capital Pravarapura and the river Vitasta, described in the highest terms put to shame by the present polluted condition of the Jhelum. He concludes the highly poetic description of the city and the river by coming back to his own ancestor. Quote, there in Pravarapura, the king, considering the good that would arise from it, established the Brahmana on the banks of the Vitasta with a view facing the temple of Shitamshu Mauli in the northern direction. It is significant that the far-sighted king could envisage the benefit of settling a learned Brahmana in his kingdom, whose vision was actually fulfilled by his descendants, Abhinavagupta's father, Narasimhagupta or Chukulaka, and Abhinavagupta himself. It is a way of Abhinavagupta stating that it was providential for his forefathers to settle in Kashmir, a land which has the highest potential of beauty, learning, and spirituality. In fact, Abhinavagupta himself embodies these three aspects in his person, being as much an aesthetician, a scholar in various disciplines, and a great yogi. The concluding verses continue with his own genealogy, reverence to his parents and teachers, as well as to his disciples, whom he describes very affectionately. We need not go into this. But the last verse of the entire Tantra Loka is a very touching prayer to Shiva. Quote, O Shiva, and you imagine 12 volumes of a very rich text with one of the rare texts on Tantra, which is comprehensive, completely comprehensive. Quote, O Shiva, this essence of the scriptures has been composed by Abhinavagupta. Listen to it, you who listen to and know everything. Truly, it is a praise to you, since it means this text describes your nature. Being satisfied by Abhinava or by this praise, unite the whole world with yourself. This is a very touching prayer. Jagat Atmik Kurushva. Make the whole world one with yourself. So the whole purpose of this whole scripture of Tantra Loka is to unite the world with Shiva. In this prayer, the universal nature of the divine is restated, which embraces within itself the particular. But the key to the relationship between particular holy places, kshetras and tirthas, and the universal presence of the divine is given in the context of the way of space, Desha Atvan, Tantra Loka 8, and of initiation, Diksha, Tantra Loka 15. There, the sacred places, which are described according to sacred geography and can be located as such, are identified with places inside the body. This practice is called Sthana Kalpana, where Sthana refers both to a geographical place and to centers in the yogic body. The heart lotus is described with its petals consisting of holy places. They are the connecting points, Santi, between the lotus petals and the heart are named Jalandhara, an important Chattapita, Nepal, Kashmir, and others. After describing all these external and internal places, Sthana, Abhinavagupta adds characteristically, but why expand on this topic? Everything resides in consciousness, and through consciousness in vital breath, prana, and hence in the body. Therefore, it is better to go on pilgrimage in the body, in the holy places within one's own body. Again, he stresses the point a few verses later. The one who sees that the universe, Vishwam, resides principally in consciousness, in breath, and in the body, what has it got to do with other external movements by going on pilgrimage to the holy places? The internalization of space, and particular sacred space, is an intermediary stage between the impermanent importance of a region, such as Kashmir, and pure consciousness, space and time. It can be related theologically to Trika, the triad of Shiva Shakti Nara, where the objective manifestation or individuality, Anu, is not denied, but is integrated into the triadic unity, or to the triad of the three Shaktis, Para, Parapara, and Apara, particular space belonging to the upper level, its internalization in breath and body to the intermediate Parapara space, and pure consciousness to Para. Shakti is always the intermediate, the mediator between universality, Shiva, and individuality, Shakti. Nara. Nara means not only man, but every created manifestation. It is at the level of Shakti where external space becomes interiorized. At the level of Shiva, there is no exclusion, but everything is included in the all-pervasiveness of consciousness. Shiva being himself, Sambit, Chit, and Prakasha. Spiritually, the three levels are related to three spiritual ways of upaya. The first or lowest being the individual way, Anava, which uses different means, including ritual and hence also external space. The upayas are an experiential way of integration and ascension to higher levels of consciousness, ultimately to attain the universality of Shiva's all-pervasiveness, Shiva Vyapti. This is a very significant term. Far from merely stating the universality of supreme consciousness, Abhinavagupta develops it in all its implications as expressed in the dictum Sarvam Sarvatmakam. Everything is related to everything else, or all things are of universal nature, or other translations. This Sarvatmakattvavada existed in the early Sankhya system, but it was interpreted in a naturalistic way, whereas in non-dualist Kashmir Shaivism, its implication is spiritual and metaphysical. That is, the minutest thing in the universe, a blade of grass, for example, is pervaded by the divine consciousness, or in other words, contains the all. Abhinavagupta develops it, taking starting point from a verse of the Mahabharata. Yasmin sarvam yatah sarvam yas sarvam sarvataschayaha yascha sarvamayo nityam tasmai savatmane namaha. In whom everything is, from whom everything comes, who is everything and everywhere, who is immanent in all things, eternal, him, the self of all, do I adore. It is not possible to go into the detailed hermeneutics which Abhinavagupta gives to each phrase in his Paratrishika Vivarana, but it is important to note its application to all the categories of existence, tattva. The lowest of the 36 tattvas which constitute the whole universe, according to Shaivagama, the lowest is the earth category and the highest is Shiva. Since every element of the cosmos, the human being and the divine, is not just a fragment, but is itself the whole. Every part of the universe contains the totality. This is shown with the example of the lowest tattva, earth. And this is a quotation from Paratrishika Vivarana, Abhinavagupta's most esoteric text commenting on the Tantra, Paratrishika. In the supreme consciousness position, In the Supreme Consciousness, all things appear completely identical with consciousness, just as water is in water or flame is in flame, not simply like a reflected image. Whenever the Supreme Goddess Para is described for the purpose of teaching, she is brought within the sphere of cognizance only by being considered from an inferior point of view. Similarly, Bhairava, who is of the nature of light, is self-proved, beginningless, primal, the ultimate in all respects, and present in everything. What else is to be said regarding him? He displays the light identically in the expansion of all the categories of existence, the 36 tattvas, all the objective phenomena, and views them as himself in his self-delight. End of the quote. Thus the very last tattva, no, not end of the quote, it still continues. The very last tattva, Prithvi, earth, while maintaining the character as earth and holding within itself all the other innumerable earlier tattvas, that is water, fire, etc., as inseparable from itself, appearing in that form and viewed in that aspect as complete in itself. There is no difference of opinion on this matter. The Shiva principle can be considered complete only if it abides also in the last category, earth. So also the consciousness of earth, Thara Samvit, can display it as identical with the central reality in spite of its appearance as an object, only when it is able to display the awareness of all the categories as inherent in the earth category. While developing this interconnectedness of all elements and the completeness of each one, Abhinavagupta quotes a powerful statement which sounds like a sutra. Pradesha matram api brahmana sarvarupam. Even a limited space contains the entire form of Brahman. Why does he speak of Brahman here and not of Bhairava or Shiva? Because he emphasizes the etymological meaning of Brahman as that which expands, hence the pervasiveness of the divine. Let us see this sutra in its context. Quote, thus it is at first the earth which has completeness, then it is water which has also absorbed within itself the characteristics of all the tattvas. It appears and is apprehended in completeness. Finally, the earth itself is but the integral divine consciousness, that is the very self of Shiva. Thus, even a limited space contains the entire form of Brahman. The Shastras have declared it as their finding that each tattva has the characteristics of all the 36 tattvas. End of the quote. Obviously, not everybody can perceive the totality in a fragment and the all-pervasive divine in a limited space. It is the vision of the yogi whose awareness is well trained and who has expanded his consciousness to the divine, universal consciousness. And yet, potentially, this vision of the totality is open to everyone. This sutra may also give us a clue to the specific quality of a particular place, what we call sacred space, or whatever, because the experience of the totality, Brahmana Sarvarupam, may be more accessible in certain spaces than in others. This is the intermediate level of the Parapara Shakti, which partakes of both the transcendent and the immanent. And as we have seen, it is at this level where the internalization of external places takes place in the body. Deshatvam, Sthana Prakalpana. They do have their specific power through which they connect the yogi to the Supreme Para. Significantly, the Vijnana Bhairava, one of the most fundamental tantras of the tradition, describes the spiritual meaning of kshetra, sacred places of pilgrimage, in a brief equation. The great goddess Kundalini straightens herself. This is the real sacred space, which is transcendent and immanent, parapara. The same tantra again relates kshetra with the Shakti. Quote, the sacred place of pilgrimage, kshetra, consists in supreme contemplation, para bhavana, and the absorption into the Shakti of Rudra, by which all sins are removed and all beings are saved. And here, the Tantra refers to the traditional etymology of kshetra, derived from two roots, that is to destroy, kshapana, and to save, trana. Because when you make a pilgrimage to a sacred place, you want your sins to be destroyed and you want to be saved from the ocean of samsara. So this is the definition of kshetra, which here receives a completely spiritual interpretation. Now let us briefly come back to the beginning. Abhinavagupta's selection of a particular specific universe, Kanya and Kumarika, and specific countries, and the justification he gives for selecting them. Number one, out of all the universes, Brahmanda is the foremost because it is beautified by a great manifoldness of nature. Number two, in Brahmanda, the continent Kanya is most important because it is here where one can ascend from the lowest levels of existence and consciousness to divinity. Number three, the foremost country within that continent is where the sacred scriptures originate, and that is Madhya Desha. Four, finally, Kashmir, on the high level of the Himalaya, is supreme, as Shiva himself resides there, and in many places there are sages, muni, and yoginis. These are obviously not limited to a particular religion. They may be Buddhist, Shaiva, Sufi, or any other tradition, as we know historically. Thus, Kashmir is a place of sanctity, but also of learning, because the goddess Sharada herself resides over it, both leading to the fullness described by Abhinavagupta. In the light of the above, we may not find a contradiction between these foremost elect places in the universe and the statement that everything is related to all, amounting also to every place is pervaded by the divine.
Is over, Villa? You want to, you're done, or you want to say anything more? Can you hear?
I couldn't.
Can you hear?
sagen möchtest. Ob du noch etwas sagen möchtest.
I've concluded. If there's any question.
Oh, okay. No, before I move into a few questions, I wanted to read out the comments that we have been seeing. One comment that I see here is well known to us from Professor Mihai Zafar, an adorable scholar. May the Lord Shiva bless him. I must thank Professor Mihai Zafar. He was instrumental in bringing me into contact with you in Varanasi. Although I had details from Dr. Nagasamy and somehow I could connect with you. He is also saying, wonderful, crisp, clear, and enlightening. Thank you, MDS, for this is from Sita Shankar from Coimbatore. Thank you, MDS, for enabling us to listen to such eminent scholars on such topics which we do not get to hear normally. I see few comments from people keep coming. Just wanted to touch few points on what you talked about, Professor Bäumer. You mentioned about Vitasa river, the condition that is put us to shame today, right? Somebody mentioned. Is it only the condition of Vitasa? There are quite a few other things that put us to shame today, right?
Well, when we read these descriptions of the beauty of Kashmir and how much of pollution has happened both to the Dal Lake and to Jhelum, it is a reminder that apart from political and whatever else, but we have to pay more attention to the ecological aspects and to bringing Kashmir back to its purity in the ecological sense.
You also touched on pilgrimage, Kashmir the Supreme, not limited to any particular pilgrim sanctuary or religion. So that aspect of pilgrimage to Kashmir has been lost over the 1,000 years time, right? That's what we are trying to reintroduce now. Like we've been always talking about Kashi, Rameshwaram. You meant on that pilgrimage to Kashmir.
No, that was the question. You understand?
I was referring to you were mentioning pilgrimage to Kashmir, which must have been lost over the centuries. You have any comments about the pilgrimage that people should undertake now to Kashmir?
Well, I'm so grateful to you for this series, which throws light on the tradition and heritage of Kashmir, and I am very honored to be part of this. And I think it is contributing a lot to an awareness because mostly we are sidetracked by politics, but this attention to the tradition and to the real heritage of Kashmir is very much necessary and to bring it to the wider public. So I thank you for this effort and I have learned a lot from it. Thank you.
There is one final point I want to make. I was reading about you. Les femmes mystiques, Histoire et Dictionnaire. It says about you. She is convinced that spirituality or mysticism of Kashmir Shaivism contains an essential message today because it's able to respond to a spiritual thirst that is felt everywhere. I hope you remember. That must have been some 25, 30 years ago. An article I read about you in Farm form mystic. I hope you remember. So I was going to ask you about that spiritual thirst. It is still existing or is it growing? What are your thoughts about that? You mentioned that Kashmir Shaivism answers to that spiritual thirst.
I think the topic which I have presented shows that Kashmir Shaivism has, it's not a question of 1,000 years ago. It has so much to contribute to our present problems and to solving our present tensions. And so we have to study those scriptures also in the light of our present questions and getting answers from them for what we need now. So that's why it's not only a question of scholarship of the ancient texts, but to bring them to the present and to arouse, a discussion. Also, even scientifically, I've been organizing a conference in Shimla Institute on science and spirituality, where I have also presented the aspects of Kashmir Shaivism which can contribute enormously to a dialogue with science, especially physics and yes, it has a lot of potential, and the many things are interestingly coinciding, like the view of the universe and the consciousness in the particles of the universe. And so it has a great potential for this kind of dialogue with science, and of course dialogue between other traditions. That is what we are trying to strengthen also with this series.
So that spirit and awareness are getting revived, or it's growing now with this kind of awareness campaigns. People are getting to know more about Kashmir, and that's what I think you mentioned, the thirst. So thank you, madam, for your enlightening speech today. It was very interesting, and taking some time off from your afternoon from Salzburg and sparing some time for us. It has been a pleasure having you with us in our Kashmir series.
Thank you.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
We thank you, viewers, for joining us in this very interesting topic that we have been covering in our series. We thank Consumer channels, YouTube and Facebook for streaming our video and also VDSP. Not to forget, as always, I mentioned about Dinamana, which is a great coverage of our topics. We look forward to seeing you again every Saturday, same time, 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Jai Shankar.